Good afternoon. I'm Bryan Sanderson, U.S. Beef Business Manager, and sitting next to me is Laurentia van Rensburg, Head of Commercial Nutrition. And yesterday, here at NCBA, we were part of a Cattlemen's College presentation. I led a panel that Laurentia sat on with a couple others, and it was all about building better females, really focused on the heifer side of things. And wanted to continue that conversation today, kind of dive into things maybe a little deeper than we were able to in the brief time we had yesterday. And given record prices we've seen in the cattle business lately, the cost of whether it's a heifer calf to buy to develop or the fact that guys need to sell something or have a calf to sell, it's important that they get bred, they rebreed, and they stay in the herd a long time. So, how's it going, Laurentia?
It's great. I mean, what's not to love? We're here at CattleCon,
And this is what, your about 30th podcast, so far?
pretty much. But I love talking about how we can help our producers increase their performance and profitability. So, we did talk about it quite a bit yesterday, and I think there was a lot of questions from producers, especially as you mentioned, how do we keep developing females that's already that's coming into the herd, but also how do we keep our cows as productive as possible?
A common topic, or was talked about quite a bit, was fetal programming yesterday. There's a lot of questions about it. For the audience here, can you kind of explain what fetal programming is and why it's important, and maybe what it would do or could do for heifers' longevity in the cow herd?
Yes, and we do see a lot more research talking and focusing on maternal programming or fetal programming, so to speak. And what that really means or refer to is any insult or stimuli during fetal development. So anything that happens to the mother while that fetus is developing from conception to calving. And what we've seen is through certain nutritional strategies, you can have a direct impact, not just on how that fetus is growing and developing, that's going to impact, say, birth weights or weaning weights, but even when we look at trace mineral strategies, how that can impact reproductive efficiency of the offspring as well.
And with that, there's usually a lot of criteria producers use to select heifers, whether it's in their own herd or if they're going out and purchasing heifer calves to develop, to breed, and bring into their cow herd. Is mineral or nutrition something that maybe producers should be asking the other producers or who raise those heifers to help determine how long that heifer can stay in a cow herd?
Absolutely, because if we look at the research and we think that whether we're looking at protein or energy nutrition of the dam, the impact it can have on, let's say, muscle formation of the calf, right? But then we look at trace minerals, and we know that trace minerals are essential nutrients that can have a direct impact during gestation on the developing fetus. And we know that trace minerals are essential for hormone synthesis. So what we've seen with research in the field is by feeding these organic type of trace mineral programs, we can have a direct impact on calves from cows that was supplemented with organic trace minerals and how early those heifer calves reached puberty or puberty attainment. And what we've seen is if you can influence when a heifer calf reached puberty attainment, you can actually impact lifetime performance. So that is really one of the big benefits we see with maternal or fetal programming and the impact nutritional solutions can have.
You mentioned organic trace minerals. There's kind of two forms of trace minerals, right? Inorganic and organic. What's the difference between the two?
So inorganic trace minerals typically refer to byproducts from other industrial processes. So that would be your sulfates, your oxides, your chlorides, or even the hydroxy type minerals. Whereas organic trace minerals just simply mean you take that metal ion and you bind it to a carbon compound. So under the category of organic trace minerals, there's also a lot of variability between these different products in how that product is manufactured, and that will have a direct impact on bioavailability of this product and also the levels you can use effectively to see performance improvements.
How can a producer know if they're feeding inorganics or organics?
One of the easiest ways to tell is to look at your feed tag or your mineral supplement tag, right? So if we look at ingredients, typically, for example, if we look at zinc or copper, it would say zinc sulfate or copper oxide. That would be an indication it's an inorganic form. Now, for example, with Bioplex, if we see a zinc proteinate, we know that it's in the most bioavailable form. And obviously, then typically we can feed much lower levels. So looking at your tag, it's much more important to distinguish between the form of trace minerals in your program rather than the actual amount. Because we actually, due to higher bioavailability, can get away with feeding much lower levels of these organic type of form of minerals. Selenium is another one that's very important. So inorganic selenium, typically very, very toxic. So that's why it's limited at 0.3 parts per million. So on a tag, it would read as sodium selenite, whereas if you use the organic form of selenium, for example, like Salplex, it would read as a selenium yeast.
Would a producer be able to know how much he's feeding, inorganics or organics if they're in combination?
That is typically it's a little bit harder to distinguish. A lot of people would put combinations of inorganic and organic trace minerals, and then they do not have to report the amounts, they just have to actually report the form. But there is certain programs, high premium programs, that utilize just organic trace minerals, and I would say this is the most transparent type of feeding programs, because if you just have organics in there, then there's no guessing how much is inorganic organic. So basically we're avoiding the tag dressing type of situations. And a lot of times we would refer to this type of solutions as total replacement technology, where you take out all the sulfates, you come in with lower levels, but in the organic form. So what the producers see on that level is 100% what they're getting in the most bioavailable form.
And if I'm not mistaken, on the feed tag where it lists the ingredients, they usually have to list those by order of inclusion, highest to lowest. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so as they're reading the ingredients, if a sulfate comes before a complex or a chelate or a proteinate, you can kind of determine, at least if you're feeding more or less inorganic versus organic.
Absolutely. And I always say, if there is any doubts in your mind, then, and especially when you work with situations where you really want to optimize performance, then it's really count in your favor to go and look at these programs that follows total replacement technology, where you actually can get more. You can get your animals to perform as close to genetic potential by actually taking out these sulfates, which can have high impact on degradation of your vitamins. So remove the sulfates, come in with lower levels of bioplexes and salplex, and actually see an improvement in performance.
And given the prices, the genetics we have now, the investment to move up, in cost per bag to a fully TRT or organic mineral versus the inorganics might make some sense now.
Oh, absolutely. And especially if we keep in mind that we're not just thinking about the individual cow today. If she gets bred and you're going to retain some of those heifers, yes, when we go back to fetal programming, if we fed those calves with the most bioavailable form, even while in utero, it can have an impact on their future performance. So, as I've mentioned, typically if a heifer calf gets bred in her first 21 days, she's going to keep that advantage with higher conception rates and wean higher calves for the first 6 seasons. So that can have a tremendous impact on your bottom line.
If a producer is like, hey, I'm ready to go from the inorganic program I'm on to this, TRT organic program, when is the best time for them to switch? Go ahead.
Whenever you make that decision, the sooner the better, right? Your benefits that you'll see will also vary on where you start. What is the cow's current trace mineral status? But I always recommend, if you can do so at least 90 days before breeding, that's really where you're going to see the biggest impact. But if you can feed these cows on a high level program year round, you're going to see the biggest impact, especially when it relates to fetal programming.
Yeah, yesterday in the Cattlemen's College panel, and even so far today, we've really only talked about the female side of things, but that is only half the equation. Can we talk about handling bulls or mineral supplementation and the benefits there as well?
I think for bulls it's even more important than for females, right? Because they contribute to such a large percentage of your overall reproductive success rate. And what we know is that nutrition of our bulls is equally, if not more important, but typically we need to start looking at feeding our bulls to set them up for a successful breeding season 60 days prior to, because typically it does take at least 60 days for spermatogenesis. So we know that trace minerals are very important for bulls, for hormone synthesis as well. And we've seen if you can switch from inorganics to more bioavailable form like Bioplex and Cellplex, we can have a positive impact not only on sperm quality, but motility as well. And that can have a big impact on your herd's overall reproductive success.
There's a lot of producers now that are spending time, effort, money in looking to AI, ET, that kind of stuff versus maybe bull breeding. Is there an advantage to mineral supplementation for one or the other? Should they manage them different?
They definitely tend to manage them different, right? But the overall outcome is the same. You want to improve
reproductive performance.
So what we see with AI, typically if you're going to invest in synchronization and the genetics, then you definitely want to make sure your cows are in optimum trace mineral status, because you definitely want to make sure that that investment is returned. And if she is if her trace mineral status is improved, then yes, you should see an improvement in repro as well.
Before NCBA kicked off, we had a pre-meeting, with the team, and you presented some data looking at, operations of rather large size that have switched from kind of an inorganic program to more of a TRT program. Can you talk about some of the specifics they saw in breeding? Because I think there was better conception rates, heavier weaning weights, and I think there was an animal health component to that too.
Mm-hmm. One of the big benefits we've seen was actually weaning rate as percentage of exposed female. And as we know, every time we can increase the number or the pounds weaned per exposed female is when we have a direct impact on economical sustainability or profitability, right? One of the big benefits we've seen when comparing the Bioplex and Cellplex program to a inorganic combination product was that we have improved reproductive efficiency compared to historical data. And it was by quite a significant amount, I think 4% in this specific case.
As we come to a close, are there any last comments you have? What did I not ask you?
Well, I think for our producers, one thing that I always say is, how do we know what is the best program for your operation? Because there's a lot of different brands out there, there's a lot of different products out there, but start by asking for product-specific research and product-specific recommendation. In the past, we've seen variability, especially when looking at repro data between these different organic brands, and it's because there's such a big difference in efficacy and levels you can use between different products. So always ask for product-specific data and work with companies that have actually done a lot of university and commercial data as well.
Laurentia, our time, I think, has come to a close. It's been great to have you here. Good to see you at NCBA, and we'll catch you again next time.
Thank you, Bryan. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.